All right, we are at the top of the hour and we've got so much that we want to share with you and discuss with you. So we're just going to kick things off. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. So many of you contributed your questions in advance by the survey, which was so appreciated and so helpful so that we make sure that we really talk about the things that matter to you guys right now. I'm going to quickly introduce the phenomenal group of leaders and professionals that we have with us today that I'm so grateful, so honored to have a part of this, to be here with us. And to do everybody justice, I'm going to read. And then I guess a quick note before we start is if you want to chat live, or if you want to chat live and if you want to ask questions live as you go, as they come to you, then use the chat box within the webinar, the Q&A box, and within Zoom, and we will be looking at those. We'll answer them as we go if we can, and otherwise we'll save them to the end and we'll also address them. All right, so we have five plus myself, incredible panelists here, experts. And first here on the left, we have Mr. Aaron Marks, who is the Senior Principal at Dynamics. Aaron supports clients across the domestic, national, and homeland security communities, and he has been for quite some time now. He provides operational and subject matter expertise in intelligence, analysis, disaster preparedness, crisis and incident management, and continuity of operations for healthcare-related concerns. Aaron's been really, really active in the management through COVID-19, and he also is a volunteer paramedic. Am I correct? I don't have that one written down, so paramedic on his spare time, which I don't understand how he has any, but that's what he does when he's not doing everything else that he's doing to help the world. We also have Ashley Davis. Ashley is the VP of Community Engagement for Punch Alert. Ashley helps brands and marketing strategists as a brand and marketing strategist, she partners with CEOs and executives and solopreneurs to grow their brands. So Ashley has spent over a decade working in strategic communications for multi-million-dollar brands and startups. And during her spare time, she has 5 kids that she also raises or helps co-raises. We also have Chris Shung, who is the Deputy Chief of Police for Mountain View Police Department. He is nearing on his 30-year anniversary as a law enforcement officer. And Chris is a strong leader for his agency and the Mountain View community. And I've had the opportunity over the years to work and collaborate with Chris and watch how he is a true leader in the law enforcement profession across this nation. And he really works proactively and with his whole heart at bridging the divide that we've seen. We see it now and we've seen it for years from between law enforcement and community. And he's been proactively working on that, and the results that you guys see in Mountain View is a direct result of that incredible leadership. We have Mr. Eric Anez. So Eric is the Global Head of Business Resilience at Finastra, and he has spent the last decade leading change and transformation in the operational resilience field. Eric helped lead the private sector's response to Hurricane Maria, and he's worked with the Department of Homeland Security at the DHS in continuity of operations projects for mission-critical facilities across the U.S. We have Mr. Lisi Ducanto, which I hope that I'm doing that name justice. Lisi is the Executive Vice President and Managing Director for BCW. Lisi drives healthcare and social impact policy and strategy. He helps shape strategic direction on diversity and inclusion and belonging for the firm and all of its clients. Lisi is a values-driven leader with unparalleled experience in developing and leading integrated public affairs, campaigns combining strategic communications, public relations, political legislation initiatives, policy, coalition building, grassroots efforts, and advocacy. And then finally, we have me, Melissa Agnes. I am the CEO and founder of the Crisis Ready Institute, which is hosting this webinar today. I'm an author of the book Crisis Ready, Building an Invincible Brand in an Uncertain World. And I've spent my career so far working in both the public and private sectors, across industries, helping organizations really truly build what I call a crisis-ready culture. So looking from within, not just having crisis management planned, but having a culture that changes with the times, that evolves with the times, and really puts people first and is ready for anything that may strike. So with that said, we wanted to start by painting a picture of the current landscape. So what we've experienced, and when we say what we've experienced, it's today, it's yesterday, it's last week, it's since the start of 2020, really. Since the start of 2020, we have been experiencing unprecedented times. And what's been interesting for me with the different tables that I sit at, that I have the privilege of sitting at with leaders around the world, is that I've watched since about January, February 2020, that nobody has or had all of the answers. And that was really interesting to me because it just showed just how much we were in, or we are in, unprecedented times, and how nobody had all the answers in the heat of the moment. And then that trickled, of course, down from, and I'm talking about from every level of leadership across government around the world, straight down to corporate leadership and then community leadership. We've had an overload right now, or we're in an overload with multiple impactful events happening at the same time. And it's one of the things of being crisis ready, why it's so important, is building that brand resiliency, that culture of resiliency, because, and Aaron Marks has blogged about it on the Institute's blog, talking about, the world is looking, last month, a few weeks ago, was looking at COVID-19, right? And staring at COVID-19 and not thinking about anything else. Meanwhile, we had severe weather season fast approaching, which we are currently in a lot of places across this continent. And then we have, civil rights protests and the movement that's happening that's impacting communities and impacting businesses, all amidst COVID-19. So looking at an overload right now and looking at the impact that has on organizations and how you can really set yourself up for success and resiliency in that, to be volatile and, well, to be flexible and limber in a volatile, highly volatile situation. So that's something that everybody is experiencing right now. We've watched around the world, across the country and around the world, how governments and officials continuously have been losing people's trust. And I'm talking again from the beginning of 2020, right? Not having all of the answers and not knowing what to do, not having been crisis ready, not knowing how to lead. And then we have, as a result of that, we have communities and we have organizations that have been sitting there going, well, then where do we turn to if nobody's leading us and we need to lead our people and we need to lead our communities and we need to lead our stakeholders? How can we do that? And that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today is, how can you do that? How can you set your organization up for success, even when the people that you would, or the organizations, the entities that you would turn to traditionally to help guide you, to help support you, may not have all the answers themselves and may not be taking the right or the best course of action. So how does that not impact you so that you can lead the way that you need to lead? In alignment with that is leaders are reactive, which never offers the best advantage. When you are reactive, you are working off of emotion. You aren't, there's a difference between being reactive and then being strategically proactive. So being strategically proactive is having that strategic foresight, being able to look ahead, anticipate to the most extent possible what's coming, and then to respond in a way, whether it's proactive or reactively proactive, or proactively reactive, I should say, which means that you're not in crisis management mode in the sense that you're just knee-jerk reacting rather than being strategic. And we've been seeing this across the board, that leaders across the board, government and corporate, have been reactive, and that's never in the best position. That's never in your best interest. So today we're going to talk about how to not be in that position. And people, as a result of all of this, people are scared and they are infuriated. They're both, and that is not a combination that leads to anything easy, right? That means that we have to filter through emotion, that we have to understand emotion, and we have to, even through our own emotion, be in a position where we can lead properly, effectively, to impact change, to impact moving forward in the best possible direction for our communities, for our stakeholders, for our organizations. And there's a big space right now that's open for that, because there is a lack of leadership in this country and around the world throughout COVID-19, throughout the protests and everything that we're seeing today. And that means that there's a space for you to rise as that leader. And today, that's a big part as to what we want to do to help you get there, or what we're going to do to help you get there. So quickly, what to strive for. Foresight and getting ahead. So to continuously work to gather information and evaluate the multi-dimensional risks and impacts of a highly volatile, unprecedented situation, right? And that was one of the things that I saw from the very first start of COVID-19, where leaders coming to me and saying, we're being reactive. We don't have that strategic foresight. So how do we equip ourselves with that, with a framework to be able to have that, so that we can be strategic and move forward in the best possible way? Today, we're going to talk about that. To make the best possible decisions with the information that you have daily. This means getting comfortable in the fact that you don't have all the answers, and that you have to do what you have to do today with the best possible information that you can acquire to make the best possible decisions, and get comfortable in the space of knowing that tomorrow that direction might change. And when you're in crisis management mode, that's okay, but that's a very vulnerable space as a leader to be in. So getting comfortable in that is really, really important, and And then ultimately, it's to be the leader that your employees, your clients, and your community are seeking. And that means to lead with confidence and with humanity rather than out of fear. And again, that's a big thing that we've seen since the start of this year, is leaders leading out of fear. And again, that never puts you in the right position. So how do you overcome that? Aaron, do you want to add to?
Sure. Thanks for the invitation. Good afternoon, everybody, or depending on where your time zone is, the appropriate greeting there. So Melissa made a point, and she's absolutely right. We're dealing with an unprecedented environment right now in terms of complexity and crisis. And this is by no means an all-inclusive picture of what we're looking at, but there are three primary legs that we're dealing with right now. We've got the COVID-19 pandemic, which a lot of people have been predicting for decades, and everyone was sure would never happen. And Murphy got bored, and the COVID pandemic started. So we've got national and international loss of life. We've got stress lifelines and systems, and we're making decisions and doing things in ways that we aren't used to, and we've never had to in the past. So everyone was under a pretty good amount of stress with that. Add to that civil unrest. And I know there are some people who are not happy with that term, but I'm using it as a broad covering element because we've got multiple types of civil unrest going on right now. On a global scale, we've got people who are no longer happy with the way that the pandemic has been managed. They're not happy with the restrictions on their lives. They're not happy with the impacts politically or economically. And then they've lost trust in authority and leadership. So they've lost trust in the systems that they were depending on. Here in the United States, add on to that, we've got a generational, or actually a multi-generational crisis in inequality and inequity coming to a head. And that was triggered by the death of George Floyd. And that's erupted into protests and riots and a whole nother additional level of crisis that we're dealing with, that are having consequences on a national level, as well as with individual businesses and people who are impacted by these events. And then the third leg of this issue that's going on is allostatic load. And allostasis is essentially the physiology that you have in response to prolonged or repetitive stress. Allostatic load is a normal part of life. Stress is what tells us to pay attention and move forward and live. But constant stress can result in allostatic shock. And shocking the system to the point where you can no longer deal with stress can also result in post-traumatic stress injury and a whole nother cascade of consequences. But we've got additional things besides COVID, besides the civil unrest going on, geopolitical instability, localized political issues, natural and technological hazards. We've got the severe weather season beginning in the United States. We've got nuclear reactors in Europe that are having technical issues. We've got the ongoing political issues in Asia and in South America. So it's all adding up, and people have been under prolonged stress for 3 or 4 months now, and our systems aren't designed to take that into place. So there's a lot of complexity. You can't just focus on one piece. You can't say, I'm only going to look at COVID. I'm only going to look at inequality and inequity. I'm only going to look at protests and riots. They're all related, and you have to take them all into consideration as you become more crisis ready and move forward to guide your organizations through this.
Thank you, Aaron. So to viewers, what we wanted to do, I mean, what we're doing right now is we have 5 phenomenal leaders and complementary experts. And so we didn't want to make it any kind of like straightforward presentation. And this is really meant to be a dialogue. So we're going to lead the conversation with some really important questions that we see coming at us all the time from clients and different leaders across, sectors and around the world. So those are going to be the driving questions, which I'll share in a second. And then it's going to be a conversation, and a conversation that we would love for you to be a part of. So please use the chat box and contribute if you have comments, if you have questions. This is your time. This is the time that we want to give you the most that we possibly can, because to Aaron's point, there's a lot going on, and the world needs every organization right now to step up and lead in the best possible way. And we want to give you, from our capacity, the best opportunity to help you do that. So that being said, in the midst of all of what's going on, all of the chaos, or seemingly chaos, let's work to get you crisis ready. So the very first question is, what does the new normal, everybody keeps talking about the new normal. So what does this new normal look like, and how can you leverage and gain from strategic foresight in a time where no one has all of the answers? Does anybody from our brilliant panel want to kick this off?
Sure. Okay.
I was just going to add really quickly to your opening comments, and then also what Aaron walked us through. I think the key here is you have to be nimble and robust at the same time. You really need to be robust enough to take a punch and kind of continue to move forward. But you have to be nimble enough to actually have some shift in your strategy as you go along, because this new normal, or this new reality, or however it is that we want to label it, it's going to continually change, and it's going to continue to evolve. And we are going to experience setbacks. And we are going to sort of get complacent at times, and some other things going to come up, either within the ecosystem in which you operate. It could be within a specific group within your organization. It could be within the infrastructure of your organization, especially as we're all starting to sort of operate remote. And as we sort of work in this world where things seem to be easier because we have a lot more tools at our disposal to actually get work done and redefine how work actually happens, there's a lot of complex relationships that are happening from both a technological and a people perspective that are very tightly coupled. And when something goes wrong, it takes a lot of time to kind of peel the layers back and figure out how we're going to get back to normal. So one of the main things that I've been driving through this time, at least with my organization, it's understanding that yes, we want to continue to be crisis ready. We want to continue to maintain some sort of normalcy as we do this, but there's got to be that flexibility and have that nimbleness in how we operate and how we see things, to know when to shift our current focus or our strategy to make sure that we're not heading into another sort of potential issue.
And I think Eric is absolutely right, and welcome everyone. The world is certainly changing minute by minute. It's no longer day by day. And what we know is that the twin crises that are convulsing the United States, both the pandemic as well as the epidemic that we are seeing in racial inequity and justice, is forcing companies to rethink and rewrite and rebalance their social contract with their employees, with the communities they serve, and with those that they engage with. And a key focus of that rebalance has to be for companies and leaders, both in the private sector, to embrace the opportunity that the current moment provides to help them be more inclusive, more diverse in their perspectives, in their thinking, to unlearn some of the stale patterns and confront some of the limited narratives, and to really champion what we see today as the foundation of business recovery, business reimagination, and business innovation, and will help us to get out of that. And what that is, this we agenda of diversity inclusion that is necessary part of everyone's of every company and leader's relevance and innovation. COVID-19 and the epidemic that we're facing today in inequity brought to the forefront in the epidemic, it is a mass scale crisis with mass scale multidimensional impact that you've heard Aaron talk about. It will take us many years to really understand the impact it has on all of us, but there are things that we can do today as leaders and as companies to help address that. And some of those are, I'd say, three things. As a leader, in my view, there are four areas, four qualities that we all want to focus on in times of crisis. One is awareness, the second is vulnerability, the third is empathy, and the fourth is compassion. These are all critical for any leader in times of crisis, to really tune inward and a point of self-reflection, and making sure that as you're putting together your crisis architecture in response, that you have the critical voices at the table, and that you tune outward to make sure that you're bringing others into that decision-making, and that you use that diverse and inclusive perspective on the situations that you're facing today, tomorrow, the next day, to derive meaning from the work that you do and how you lift yourself out of this crisis faster, and ultimately the kind of leader and organization that you want to be in this critical time for all of us in this world.
Thank you, Lucy. Does anybody want to add?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead, Ashley.
I was just going to say that you know, what I'm seeing a lot of is that companies are, if they're not able to drive revenue, you know, because of, you know, the time, they've turned themselves into resources and a voice also, and using their platform, right? Which I've just been so excited to see, because the private companies that I feel like are turning into the true leaders, leading us through this change, are taking that opportunity to really be there for their stakeholders in a way that we haven't seen before. And I guess the key thing for me was being a resource for their stakeholder groups as well. Turning that knowledge that they have and being able to lead, you know, by being that resource.
Aaron, go ahead.
I mean, that's absolutely a key point. There's a question in the chat asking about why not focusing on post-traumatic growth. And I think looking at post-traumatic growth is part of managing the crisis. It's part of recognizing that in crisis, there's opportunity. In change, there's opportunity. You just have to have the capability, being robust, being resilient, and being flexible enough that you can work through the trauma, that you can work through the chaos, and then find the opportunity. And recognizing that there is traumatic injury, that's the opportunity. You have to decide whether you're going to let the complexity and chaos define you, or whether you're going to move forward with it. And then talking about the new normal, I'm not really comfortable with saying new normal because it's changing every minute. You know, every new voice comes in, it's a new piece of research, new piece of opinion. A lot of conversations I'm having, we're talking about the new comfortable as opposed to the new normal. Where can we continue to work? Where can we continue to live? And what do we accept and what don't we accept to move forward with that? And I think the pandemic, the science side of this, it's a lot easier to figure out where that comfortable piece is when you're talking about masks or social distancing or physical distancing or opening a business or not. I think that the concept of a new comfortable is going to be completely blown out of the water and redefined as we move forward with the other crisis that we're dealing with the injustice and the inequality. And I think that as a nation, that people are realizing that we're not comfortable with how we are now and that it has to change. And we just want to make sure that as those changes move forward, that you as an individual and as an organization, you're ready to deal with that change and to help support it and move it in the direction that's the best. And I don't want to say right, because I don't know what right is right now, but we have to be better than we are.
I like that, Aaron. And if I can, I want to make a caveat on that in the sense of the new comfortable. It's really important. Comfort, when you're comfortable, you're complacent. As a human being, and we are all human beings, no matter what organization we work for, or what industry we're in, or where we are in the world, in order to evolve, in order to grow, we have to get comfortable within the discomfort and then move past that, right? It's on that other side of discomfort that we get to evolve and that we progress and that we see change and we have impact, whether it's for ourselves, for our communities, for our organizations, et cetera. So in calling it the new comfortable, I also want to just kind of have that caveat or say that caveat or bring it to the table that we're not seeking, we shouldn't be, in my perspective, seeking comfortable. To Eric's point, we need to have a culture of an organization of people that come together to make up an organization that are comfortable in the discomfort in order to get to that other side and to grow and to be better and to evolve with the times and to fit the, to be progressive and to continue to lead in the right way. And for our communities, and when I say communities, I mean our stakeholders, I mean our communities, our internal communities in an organization, just, over an umbrella that encompasses it all. And then I also want to say that, Lisi, to add to yours, I want you to, if you can, you said awareness, vulnerability, something, and compassion. I missed the third piece. You're muted.
Empathy.
Empathy, okay. And with that in mind, just to, if I can add to that, is one of the things that I've said since the beginning of my time. Organizations will ask me, if you don't know what to do, if you don't know what to do and you have to make a decision, how do you know that you're making the right decision? How do you know that you're, managing a situation in the right possible and the best possible way forward? And to kind of reiterate Lisi's point, those come down to your values. Awareness, vulnerability, empathy, compassion, they come down to what your values are. And I always say that when you don't know the answer, your values as an organization should be your guiding beacon. And they will always, if you put people in the right, you are working to manage relationships, to grow relationships, to foster relationships, to strengthen relationships, to do good by the people that you serve, and you do that in alignment with your values, then when you don't know, when everything is chaotic, that's always a guiding beacon that you can follow. And now I will let you guys talk.
Indeed, Melissa. And I would say part of this cultivating, if you will, compassionate leadership that's needed in crisis is that tuning inward and turning outward and bringing the diverse perspectives that are going to help accelerate us out of these crises and others. And important in that is to create time and space for self-connection and self-awareness, which I think the globe is doing right now, given what we're facing. And understanding how you're interacting with your community, your employees, your customers, how are you being heard? And to your point, are there things that may make me uncomfortable that I ought to be engaged in? I think it's perfectly healthy to walk around, as they say, with the pebble in your shoe. And I wish more people would do that, to have that greater uncomfort that's necessary to transcend the crises that we're in. It's multidimensional, it's mass scale. And I see in the chat room the questions around mental health. We won't begin to know, as I had said earlier, what the effect is, the actual mass scale trauma that the world has endured, not only from the pandemic itself, but now here in this country and elsewhere, for what's happening around racial inequality and injustice. And it's important to begin to think about what that will be. We don't know what that impact will be on some of the youngest of our society, and how they view what's happening, and how that will manifest itself in their engagement moving forward. So self-connection and self-awareness are critical to help lift us out of this crisis faster, particularly with regard to businesses and leaders. And that's something I would highly push and encourage all of us to be thinking about from our personal and our professional standpoint.
Just to add to that very quickly, on the topic of mental health and leadership, I think it's important no matter where you are in the organization, because we all feel the stress. So acknowledging that and voicing and communicating that to our employees, our circle of trust, or our social circles at work is integral in getting that conversation started, because everyone is feeling it and not as many are talking about it. Especially important when the leaders talk about it, that it opens up that door for a leader to say, you know what, I'm struggling in these areas and I feel helpless in these areas, but we as a company can go XYZ down this path. That's the beginning, and I think the leader's responsibility to set that boundary and make it safe for everybody to do so.
That's a great point, Chris. And sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and especially for leaders, we need to make sure that we communicate in the way that's appropriate for everyone in our organization, right? I think 2020, we have, potentially 4 to 5 different generations working side by side. And not all of us receive information the same way. Not all of us like to receive information the same way. And leadership, that's where that being nimble comes into place, right? Leadership needs to be able to have that flexibility to make sure that the message is received in the way that leadership wants it to be received and how it's intended to be received by all those different generational people within the organization.
Thank you. And I'll add, and then I think our next question will build onto this. But yesterday, what I find interesting is talking about the discomfort, the uncomfortable space, and to Chris, your point, just being an authentic leader, right? That's comfortable in their vulnerability. That's really challenging, and especially when it's in unprecedented times and emotions are high, your own and everybody else's, and you don't know where the direction of your company, and just all of this is on your shoulders. And I was having a conversation yesterday with a friend, a peer, and we were talking about a client that said, prominent leader that came and said, here's my questions, here's what I don't know. And the response that I gave was, share that, because that is what is going to make you personable and empowering and just open to people actually relating to you, to show your humanity and that we are all in this together. And their hesitation, and when I talk about getting comfortable in discomfort and not leading out of fear, is their response, and this I think it's everybody's instinctive response for the most part, was, well, that's going to take away the mystique. It's like, we need to take away the mystique. right? We need to, that is what leadership needs today, or that's what leadership means today. And it's just to kind of reiterate that it's really, really challenging to do. And so having a support system also that challenges you to that and also empowers you to that, and is doing that alongside you in their capacities is another really important factor that I've seen really strong leaders kind of add to their wheelhouse. So that said, our next kind of topic, a line of topic was, and we mentioned a couple of them, but what are the key considerations that need to be a part of your decision-making matrix? So in order to put all of what we're talking about into actual practice and take the best possible foot forward every single day with everything that we have or don't have in our wheelhouse or at our disposal, from your guys' experience, what does that look like? How can you build resiliency in your decision-making matrix or processes?
Well, I mean, I think the key word in your question there is having a process, having something to fall back on, where if you don't know, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you don't know where to start, go back to step one. Find your, establish that starting point. And for crisis, you've already mentioned this a couple of times and it's been echoed. You need to start with your values and your priorities. What's important? What is going to drive your decision making? What is going to focus your attention? And having those core values and being aware of them is going to start to lay out your playing field, so you can work through your problems or work through your challenges. And then with the priorities, it's what are you protecting, or what are you attempting to restore? Are you the type of leader that wants to restore and protect that mystique? Go back into your iron tower and lead that way. Are you an evolving leader and you're gonna set your priority as recognizing the value of diversity and bringing in the various viewpoints to run from it? But you need to make sure that you recognize that as you start your decision-making process. And then part of that is deciding, why are you making decisions? If you can go back, please, on that. As Melissa mentioned, my background is in medicine. I've been paramedic for a long time. And you have to decide, are you trying to cure a disease? Are you trying to solve the problem? Or are you trying to survive the problem? Are you trying to keep your patient alive long enough that someone else can solve the problem and work with that? And a lot of people who are strong, aggressive leaders who are involved in crisis management, they always want to fix the problem. They always want to find the cure. And you have to remember that sometimes waiting until you can find a cure, you're going to end up killing your patient. You're not going to keep the organization, the community, the culture alive. It's not going to survive because you're focused on an endpoint instead of getting there. So are you making decisions to solve the problem, to solve the crisis? Or are you making decisions that are essentially buying you time to find a better answer? And when you start talking about generational and multi-generational crises like the inequity, the injustice, the equality issue that we're all coming back around to, we aren't going to solve that with one decision. But what you can do is try and manage the crisis. You can try and mitigate the damage. You can try and repair the pieces that you can affect and work towards that cumulative cure that's going to be down the way a little bit. But you have to recognize what you're trying to make that decision for and the environment you're in. You have to pull the information in so you can make that decision from a point of understanding. And there are challenges with that because you're never going to have enough information to make the perfect decision, especially if you're dealing with a crisis. So you have to figure out where your threshold is, what sort of risk you're willing to tolerate, what sort of imperfections in your data, in your information can you work from? What's that minimum viable for your decision? And then you have to remember to act. because making decisions just to make decisions, I'd almost say that turns you into a politician, but you want to do something with it. If you decide you're going to make a change, if you decide that you're going to adapt your workplace safety and change your layout, require masks, spread out your seating for social distancing, or if you make a decision that you're going to publicly take a stand as an organization and make a statement regarding the injustice and the equality and inequity, making the decision's a first point. Then you actually have to do something with it and execute the decision. And sometimes that's the hardest piece of it, is having the confidence to step forward. So to come back around talking about information, I'm sure a lot of you have seen or heard of the transition from data to wisdom, and talking about taking raw numbers or statistics and making them usable and actionable. Most of the time that's presented as a pyramid that's flipped, with data being the broadest or the largest section and wisdom being the smallest. I approach it backwards in terms of the level of effort or the level of engagement. So data's easy. Data's numbers without context, without understanding, or without engagement. Data is, if you listen to the media, it's the number of infections that of COVID infections that are in a region or in the world. And as you move up the stack, as you invest more into it, as you apply context, as you focus that data, it can become actionable and usable, and that's information. And then as you put a little more effort and time into your information, it becomes knowledge. It's something that you can understand. It's something that you've internalized and you can really act on. And then wisdom is the target. My grandfather always told me wisdom comes from bad decisions. Wisdom comes from applying your experience and applying your gut and your knowledge, so you actually make it your own. And in a perfect world, we're going to be making decisions from a position of wisdom. But in our imperfect world, and I'm going to paraphrase a quote because I don't remember exactly where it's attributable, but we're drowning in data, but we're dying for a lack of wisdom. We've got all the numbers. We just don't understand what it all means, and we're locked into that paralysis because we don't have what we want. Now, if you look at a lot of the voices that are out there, media, social media, traditional media, they're all throwing data at you because the information that they say they're providing is in their own context, and it's their own understanding. You have to process that. You have to look at the numbers or the reports or the articles or whatever you want to call it, and you have to transform that from raw data into something that you can act on. Does it make sense for you? Is it set to your context? And then you have to decide how to manage that risk, because we're not always right. If you misinterpret the data, if you apply the wrong context, if you apply the wrong lens, you can start down a pathway that will make the crisis worse. So just remember that you can't take anything on face value, especially in a crisis. You have to figure out, where is it coming from? What's that context? And how do you apply it specifically to your requirement? And then just because every other conversation that I have, people are asking me, where do you go for dependable COVID-19 data? Where do you go for that starting point? And these are the 6 places that I go to every day to get a handle for what's going on medically in the world with COVID. And I always look for patterns, and I verify across platforms. So there's not one single point. And Melissa's going to send this information out with the deck after the conversation. But that works, or that's where I'm working from, at least from the COVID point.
Thanks, Aaron. That was helpful, and that gives framework, hopefully, that people can apply. And it's not just it's not just in this crisis or these crises. It's not just in one situation. It's really looking at a framework and a scalable framework, again, that embeds into your culture, that gives you the strength and the resilience, and to move forward in the best possible direction. Does anybody have, Lisi, did you have anything you wanted to add? I noticed that you unmuted yourself.
I think Aaron is spot on how we want to think about decision making, whether it's this crisis or the next, and there will be more. The way I also think about it, especially in this time, again, with these twin crises that are emerging, that are convulsing our country here in the world, is asking ourselves as businesses, as leaders, as individuals, who do we help? What problems do we solve? And how do we communicate our value? Or put another way, how do you express your value? The processes that Aaron walked through helps one to think through that. I think in addition to that is, what's the purpose? What is your purpose, and how are you expressing that through all of the actions that you as a business, as a leader, and others are taking in this crisis? I like to think that in crisis, people can often feel like they're in that same storm, but they're not in the same boat. And leaders play that critical role in making people and communities, both within and outside, feel heard and included, and to help. And we as crisis professionals and others in this space have the opportunity to help those leaders and partner with them to get it right. I think when we look at, as I was saying before, tuning into yourself and tuning outward is an attempt to try to help us move beyond the anxiety and the fear that exists, especially today, whether it's the pandemic or the epidemic. It's also to help us move to a better future and imagining what that is, and bringing that community, your employees or those that you engage with or those in between, together so that you can move forward in that way. And I think there are 3-4 things to focus on while we do that. One of them is developing, through the processes that Aaron described, perspective on the situation, on the crisis that you're facing, and then how you're going to derive meaning for it, for you, your employees, your community, your neighborhoods, etc. Number 2, how am I going to foster a belonging and inclusion to unify my organization on addressing and responding to this crisis, expressing that value? Number 3, as we've been saying here today, is taking care of people, your own and as well as those that you engage with, through the compassion that all leaders need in crisis and always, I would say. And while you're number 4, dealing with what's in front of you and trying to manage with the new daily realities and the urgencies around that, is reimagining and planning for that post-crisis future, in the next normal, if you will, in this world, and how you want to prepare and position yourself as a leader and as an individual for what comes next, and how you want to manifest your values and your beliefs to help you derive meaning from that.
Thank you, Lisi. Again, another framework, right? Another step-by-step. And we will summarize these. We can summarize these and send them to you. You'll get the recording of this, but also I think it would be great if we could do that, and provide a little packet on the back end of this time that we've spent together, because there's a lot of really important information. Chris, I'd love to hear from you. Just, I know that I'd just love to hear from you. I'll stop talking.
I mentioned it in the chat window, but I'll expand on it here. And this goes to the point that I brought up earlier about being honest. So as the leader of an organization, I think it's important to stand in front of your people and just freely admit, we don't know what tomorrow holds, but what we do know is we will paddle together. We will weather this, and we will get through it together. And I think what I hear, and honestly, what I feel personally as a person, as a leader too, is I feel lost. I feel like I don't know what the next answer is. I know by the book what the answer might say we're supposed to do. But truly, as I mentioned in the chat window, in those times, right, and there's a lot of questions about leaders, managers, et cetera, analysis paralysis. But when you all cut that, that's all noise. When you boil it down, is the leaders are going to emerge. And they're going to basically be the motivation, right? Why am I here? Why am I working for this company? Why do we believe in whatever this product is or what the mission of the company is? And do I believe in this person, right? And that the leader, who I would imagine is a lot of you attendees in this audience, it doesn't matter where you are in the organization, because there are leaders at every level. There are informal leaders, there are formal leaders. You can fill both, you can fill one or the other. Each of us has a different style. But the solution is to listen to your heart, listen to your values, and go, right? If you're not feeling inspired or led by the person above you, well, then turn that around and say, what are you doing to inspire and lead those around you towards the cause, right? And just keep going. Go. And it's paddling a little bit, and sooner or later you will see the horizon, you will see the beacon, and before you know it, a few months are going to go by, and people either formally or informally will look to you, right? And if you're in a good organization, they will recognize that, and you'll rise through the ranks. If you're at the top, the light is shining very brightly on you, and that is your responsibility, hands down. And if you don't feel motivated to do that, to pull people along, to be that beacon, you need to have some very honest conversations with yourself, because in like no time in any time in history, yes, we work, and yes, we're at home, but in the workspace, leaders need to really, in a sense, blur those lines and provide that inspiration and purpose, right? We all want to make sure that in this pandemic, we're doing something that's purposeful and meaningful. And so it's a lot. No one said it would be easy, but it is absolutely needed, and it's absolutely rewarding to do so.
Thank you. And that's, yeah, I've been saying, you know, looking at the strong leaders and the strong leaders and communicators, obviously, and, you know, being comfortable in that space of vulnerability and just that uncomfortable space, and communicating in a way that is honest and also provides hope, right? Provides that reassurance and provides hope. And from what I've seen throughout the pandemic and through, you know, during 2020, is really that it's a balance. It's a communicated balance between those three things: being honest and vulnerable in that discomfort of, you know, Chris, to your point, you know, you don't know what's next, and you're feeling everything that everybody else is feeling. You're the head of a community, and you are comfortable in that honesty, and then that brings people to you in saying, he gets me, right? That's exactly how I feel, and I can relate to that, and I feel heard through you feeling that way and you expressing your honest truth through that. But then it's not just about doom and gloom and I'm so scared or I don't know what the answer is, but then it's the reassurance of what we are doing. Here's what we have, to Erin's points, and here's, you know, who we're looking to, here's who we're communicating with, here's who we're working with, here's what we're doing internally, here's why we're doing what we're doing internally. And then to that hope piece of, and this is what we're striving towards. We may not have all the answers, but here's our process. We will keep you informed. We're going to keep you a part of our process, because we are working towards this better future, this better tomorrow, this new better normal. My 2 cents on this one. Does anybody else want to add?
I just wanted to add one thing. I echo what all of you have said. One thing I've always strived for in any, you know, position that I've held as a leader, which has been many, is engaging with, you know, my stakeholder groups, you know, learning from them, listening to them, because, you know, we can come up with these strategies and these processes and these procedures, but we live up here, I feel like, and they're down here dealing with all of it. So to better understand and to better communicate and help people adapt, I think that you need to understand fully, you know, where your company culture is to start from, and grow that. That also, you know, will, focus on reassurance and strengthen the trust, but engage with them, involve them at when it's necessary, you know, ask for their opinion, ask for their, what they would do in that situation. So I just think everything that you're saying is yes, but also engage with your stakeholder groups as much as you possibly can.
And no better time than, you know, this epidemic that we are living in and want to better the world as a result of, to listen and to understand. And that means, you know, different communities, that means different stakeholders, that means just listen. So thank you for adding that, Ashley. Does anybody want to add anything else? And I think this question, everything kind of ties in together, so I'm not really worried about no question getting unanswered. But yeah, so in all of this, and in addition to what everybody's saying, what are some of the mistakes and the pitfalls, and why do they exist? In the sense of, I think right now, actually no, I know right now, as human beings, as leaders, as community members, in all of the different hats and roles that we play in this world and society, because we don't have all the answers, and because so much is coming to light and so much information and awareness is being spread and actually received, it's landing, there is a fear, talk about not leading with fear, there's a fear and an uncomfortable fear of not making a mistake, not making a mistake. There's a fear of making a mistake. So what I'd love to hear from each of you briefly on what are some pitfalls to avoid, because that in and of itself, this question in and of itself, it can be a hinderer, can be a hindrance to making that progress and to leading them in the best possible way. And to Chris, reiterate what you said, leaders are everywhere. We are all leaders. I don't care who you are, what your position is, where you are, anywhere you are in the world, any status, anything, you are a leader, and what you do impacts other people. So anything that you guys want to say here?
I can start off, and just one thing I like to tell our people is it's not what you say, it's what's heard. And so there is just so much noise out there right now. You cannot get onto your smartphone or any social platform and just be bombarded by information. So if you are informing with facts, that's great, but it doesn't really set yourself up apart from the noise. So to be able to communicate with emotional intelligence and to know that your message is landing and being heard by whoever it is you're directing that to is key. It's not how many bullet points or facts that you can throw at people, because as Melissa often likes to say, you can't counter emotion with logic, right? It's just too volatile of things going on right now. So, you know, understand what your communication style is, and understand that you may need to tweak that to be heard by the right audience in the right way.
I mean, absolutely, Chris. And then I want to come back around to a point that Lisi made a little earlier, is we need to get used to working in fear. You need to get used to walking with that pebble in your shoe. You know, once again, a quote that I'm going to mishandle because I can't remember who said it is, you know, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite the fear. And we need to be courageous right now. We need to recognize the epidemic of injustice and inequality, and we need to face it, to address it, you know, square on, and instead of trying to ignore it because it makes us uncomfortable and we're scared of offending somebody. And we need to be comfortable operating in that space, recognizing that we're going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And, you know, it's not making the mistake that defines success or failure. It's how you manage the mistake, how you deal with it and move forward from it. So we need to recognize that everybody is scared. You know, it's not just us. And we need to recognize that we're going to mistakes and move forward. But the point is recognizing mistake and moving forward from it, not staying where we are because we can't survive where we are.
Right. Melissa, I would add to what Chris and Aaron have said, that this crisis, unlike any other that I think we've experienced in our lifetime, strips leadership back to its most fundamental element, which is making a positive difference in people's lives, whether it's one life at a time or more broadly. and through whatever perspective and avenue that you as a leader, as a company do. And it is in this time that it's imperative for leaders to not do what is typical of leaders in moments of crisis, is to put their head down and exhibit control. But this is the time, again, to, and the imperative to demonstrate that compassion, that vulnerability, that empathy, that awareness of what's happening with their own employees, but what's also happening in the communities that they operate. I would also add to Aaron's point, last point, that there are so many issues and questions that have been brought to the forefront by first this pandemic and the latest an epidemic that has been going on for many decades now. And it's okay to not have the answer. It's okay that we all are overwhelmed emotionally and otherwise by what we're experiencing. But it's also important that you lean into who you are as a company and as a leader. And really, as I say, step into the privilege that so many of us have, for example, to be having a virtual Zoom call and being able to engage in this way and impart ideas. What we know is that this pandemic and the epidemic has just brought in brutal fashion to the forefront so many of the challenges that societies and the vulnerabilities that have always existed across this world. And now is the time to move beyond the level of talk and to embracing the smart solutions, the inclusive and diverse solutions that are going to help lift us out of that. And to focus on bringing others into that conversation to help derive the meaning and the multiple perspectives that are going to help you come through it faster than you otherwise.
Thank you, Lucy. Does anybody want to add? Eric?
Yeah, and two great points. And to add to that, I think one of the main pitfalls is understanding that you can't meet force with force, and that you need to seek to understand before you sort of spring into action. And then also knowing, I think leadership sometimes forget that how they respond to events really matters. That's what really matters to their employees, to their stakeholders, to society, to everybody around them. They can tell within seconds of that response what the organizational values and what the organization actually stands for based on that response. And that will, ring way louder than any mission statement you have printed on your brochures or hanging on the mantle right next to the elevator. It's gonna really dictate your culture, both inside and outside of the organization, no matter what your HR marketing team are actually putting together for presentations or onboardings. Those actions is really what's going to drive that.
Thanks, Eric. So with all of the strong, solid, important advice and shares that have been the last hour, strategies for moving forward. How do listeners and viewers take all of this and say, okay, now what? What is my next step forward? And how do I impart that knowledge and that understanding, that wisdom to those that one, I need to gain buy-in from, which is often a challenge, and to just for the communities or the segments of an organization that I serve and that I lead.
If I could just use a analogy that we had on the SWAT team, I spent many years on that, and you can imagine in that scenario, in that situation, you have you can't micromanage, right? So we had a term called commander's intent, and basically the commander's intent was, I want you to get from here to there and into that room, but hold, but you really leave it to your team to decide whether they want to turn right or turn left. They'll check in with you if they have to break a door down, but they know your intent. So the takeaway for us in this current discussion is because of coronavirus, the pandemic, and everything, as Aaron says, that the pebble in our shoe, we have to get used to being adaptive in our leadership and also letting go and trusting your teams. But that's only going to happen if you've communicated them and they know clearly where your boundaries are and what your goalposts are. And if you're not articulating that, that's on you as a leader. So to really be able to voice, again, with emotional intelligence in a way that you're heard, what direction you want to go, but also providing the flexibility that your teams can be adaptive on the fly and they don't have to phone home and call and ask for permission to make every single step. That nimbleness is what gives your organization the adaptability and to move and to pivot and to do things right. Because deep down, everyone wants to do the right thing. But if they're micromanaged, they'll usually trip up when they're trying to do things your way. It's not very often that they do things out of malice. So just some thoughts to keep in mind.
Yeah, agreed 100%. And Melissa, I'm a huge proponent of having principles and having those resilience principles set on how you operate every day. I think that's how you move forward. That's how you adapt. That's how you stay nimble. And at the same time, being able to continue to move forward, create the right culture, create the right environment, give people the right tools and resources, as Chris said, to be able to sort of get out of their way, right, and allow them to do their best work and be their best selves. It's really the key going forward.
Thank you.
I would add to that these crises, as was said before, in crisis there's an opportunity, and we all in this crisis have to take advantage of this moment to think about four things. One, when we are on whatever the other side of this may look like, will you have a good answer for how did you help during the great pandemic? How did you help at the time when we needed it? And what did you do for your employees, for your customers, for your community, for the country? And how have you worked with your stakeholders to tell your story now and in the months ahead? Number two is, how did you, in this crisis, take advantage of the opportunity it created for you to build a better, more purposeful business or leader? How did you become more resilient? What steps did you put in place? What new ways of thinking and organizing did you derive, and how are you moving forward to implement those? Number three is, what are the credible solutions to the new challenges that exist, as well as those that existed before the pandemic and epidemic? And how are you positioning and preparing yourself for engaging in that for the coming months? And then finally, fourth is, as I've said before, and this is easily lost amid this crisis, is the opportunity for all leaders and businesses to embrace what I would call a new agenda, one that's not temporary, but clearly is a need to be permanent. And that's aimed squarely at the resiliency of making sure that we have diverse voices, life experiences, and expertise, and including them in what comes next. That, above all, is the most important that if you're a company or a leader or those in between, to be thinking about. Do I have all of those that around me to help me together as an organization or as a community, as a nation, to make the decisions that are most reflective of the communities that we serve, of the employees that we represent, of the value and the mission of what we get up every day and try to do.
Thank you, Lisi. Well, strong and really important. Erin and Ashley, do you guys want to add a couple of words?
Just one thing I was thinking about. Sorry, Erin.
Oh, go ahead, Ashley.
Besides taking a ton of notes from Lisi, I know we're going to have these bullet points sent out. So I feel like I'm learning so much from all of you today. But one thing that I was just thinking about is, again, just helping your stakeholder groups are your voice for your brand, right? So helping them be able to communicate the message that you're trying to get across as well. I think is huge. And I see that all the time with companies, or I would like to see it more often than I do, but companies providing kind of pre-approved messages, if you will, that can be shared and sent out. I think it's just so important because everybody has a voice and they'll use it, but also, they are the voice of your brand, they are the voice of your company. So giving them content that they can pull from and make their own as well, to tell their own story of how, your brand or your company has made them so successful as well. So that was just the only thing that I was thinking about. Thanks.
Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, I want to emphasize Chris's statement about commander's intent. And there's a comment in the comments or in the chat box about engaging employees and remembering that the members of your organization are what makes the organization work. As a leader, your job is to set the boundaries, set the direction, and say go. Your job isn't to move your organization forward. Your job is to say, this is where we want to go, and look at the members of your organization and say, get us there. Get me from point A to point B. And micromanaging doesn't really work. We've all experienced that in one way or another. So go back to your base, look at what's important to you and communicate it. And it has to be more than, like Eric said, it has to be more than the mission statement or the vision statement that's on the wall. It has to be real and it has to be communicated. And as a leader, you're that beacon and you say, follow me, or come here, or let's go this way. And then engage that diversity, engage the voices and the experiences and the points of view, because that way you move forward together. And it's not one group moving front of or another, or it's not fracturing your organization or your business. But always, when you're going to step out, when you're going to move forward, remember where you're starting from. Remember that base. Remember your culture, your values, your priorities. And if you're changing those, if you're evolving, or if you are changing the voice to diversity, then do it. Don't signal on this. Don't wave a flag and say, we think we're going to change, and then not. This is a point where taking a check swing or taking a half step can do more damage and can make the crisis worse than taking a step forward with confidence, even if you're not sure what's going to be under your foot when you put it down. So you're never going to have all of the information you need. You're never going to have all the answers that you need to make a good decision. Make the best decision with what you've got, then put some confidence in it and step forward. Because when you take that step forward, you're going to be able to deal with the next crisis and the next one after that. I've got a big sign over my desk that's a print of a comic of somebody looking at a coworker going, what are you doing today? And the answer is, I'm dealing with the consequences of what I did yesterday. So we're going to have to do that no matter what. But make a decision, have confidence, get comfortable being uncomfortable, and move forward. Because if you don't move forward, everything else is going to move and it's going to make your situation worse.
Thank you. Lucy, did you want to add something?
There's a great question that came in through the chat about being optimistic, but also being realistic and drawing on past experiences, and not learning from the crises that have preceded us to change how we then move forward. And I would say to that two things. One, what we're going through right now is a world-shifting event. There is a before and there's an after. And we've gone through that through September 11th most recently. But this is on a magnitude that the world has never seen in quite some time. And the gravitational shift has moved us to a before and after. And none of what we are talking about today, any of that is easy. But it starts with the leaders and those who have the opportunity to embrace change, to be held accountable, both by their own communities and their own employees, but also by those who are in the governing class, to ensure that there are changes, that there is a disruptive need to move forward and make the improvements that we all seen. I will say this, that Warren Buffett, to quote, since Aaron Marks is quoting a lot with some very powerful pieces, I will add to that Warren Buffett, after the Hurricane Andrew in 1993, said, "It's only when the tide goes out that you can see who's swimming naked." This pandemic has exposed so many who have been swimming naked. And for many of us, we know who those folks were. We know that those who have been the least advantaged, whether it's communities of color or vulnerable communities, those who are most susceptible to harm or neglect, the poor, the uninsured, the homeless, the elderly, the frail, those with chronic disease, those are the communities that are hurting the most. We are all obligated to make sure that the next normal is the world that better reflects who we are as a society, as a people, as a community. We all have that responsibility to ensure we don't revert back to where we came from, but that we move forward to where we need to be, both as a global nation, but here in the United States.
Thank you, Lucy. And, that brings to, the Crisis Ready Institute, talking about, Aaron, you said, not knowing maybe where your foot is going to land, but moving forward with heart and moving forward to lead the way that you want to see the world evolve into and grow into. And Lucy, to your point on just everything that everybody has said throughout this entire time, when I say we need to elevate the crisis management profession to create a crisis really ready world, crisis resilient world, it's more than just the crisis management profession. We are all, as leaders, we are crisis managers. In every single discipline, we are crisis managers because we are leaders. And we've had this conversation throughout, we've talked about this throughout this conversation. And one of the things that, I think the difference where we need to look at moving forward, taking everything that you guys have said that's been shared today, is looking at how do you create this culture of an organization that is flexible, that is adaptable, that has the foresight to be able to see things that are coming. I mean, Aaron, you set the scene earlier, and you said that people talked about the pandemic for years, that it's been forecasted for years, and not just that, but in North America, we had the opportunity, we were very lucky at the beginning to have the opportunity to see it coming because it started on the other side of the world, and it came to us last. We're the last continent for it to come to. And so that requires a culture to be able to identify risk in real time, to know what to do with it, to know how to assess it, to know the material impact that it's going to have on your organization, on your communities, on your stakeholders. And then I always look at it as we're not just taking actions to manage an incident or to silence an incident or to put it to bed because it's inconveniencing us. We are managing incidents, we should be managing incidents to come out better, to foster increased trust and credibility in our brands, in our communities, which just leads to better business. It leads to so many powerful things. And it's the mindset shift that it's, prior to 2020, let's call it, people looked at a crisis management plan versus a crisis ready culture. And there's a massive, massive difference in mindset shift that empowers an organization and every leader and every member of that organization within it. And when this pandemic started, a lot of people would come to me and say, how do you develop a plan that can be changed as quickly as the situation? Like, how is that even possible when we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring? And the answer is by doing all of the things that we're talking about here today, is changing that mindset to look at a crisis management plan to manage a crisis versus a crisis ready culture or mindset that enables you to grow with the times and evolve with the times and do good by the people you serve, which is the reason you exist as an organization, fundamentally, all, as it is. So looking at, just to kind of make that very clear, looking at a crisis management plan versus a crisis ready program, you're looking at a document that's stagnantly sitting on a shelf, traditionally speaking, that does very little to actually think of a crisis management plan prior to COVID-19. There was no plan. We couldn't predict. It was unpredictable. It was unprecedented, versus having a culture that is able to gather facts and to gather information to make the best possible decision with everything with everything that we've been saying here today in real time. A plan is traditionally theoretical versus a culture is a thing that you live and breathe. It is action oriented. Erin and others have said today, talking about taking action, actually doing something. It's not just, we've been talking, communities have been talking, and it's time to listen. It's time to understand. It's time to reflect and reevaluate, and then to actually take action forward, to be a part of, Lisi, I think it was you that said it, who do you want to be tomorrow when all of this is said and done? How do you want that to, what do you want to be proud of, right? And that culture mindset shift is a big part of that, ingraining that into your organization. It's a document versus a mindset and an experience, and it's very reactive versus being strategically proactive. And when I say strategically proactive, I mean sometimes you are proactive and sometimes you are strategically reactive. You are not, it's completely, being strategically reactive is completely different than having knee-jerk reactions and reacting out of fear and just being in that crisis management mode and just go, go, go without having any time to absorb and to listen and to reflect and to make really informed best practice and best interest decisions. And when it comes down to it, I think it's the reason that I love what I do so much, and I'm sure that you guys, I know, for a fact, it's why you guys love what you do, is because we see that it's in taking this approach and living and breathing this mindset, this culture, that it increases so much more for an organization than the mere fact of being able to manage a crisis. So looking at advantages of being crisis ready, to really hit this home, is it strengthens your internal protocols and cross-functional support. It builds a great place to work. I look at the organizations that are truly, truly crisis ready, crisis resilient, and I speak to my clients, and I speak to their people, their teams, and people love to get up to go to work. They feel as though they are actively doing good in the world. They have purpose, and this mindset shift is what is required for the new normal, right? The new comfortable, whatever we want to call it. The new, somebody in the comments said something about, I can't remember what it was, the new normal. I'll just stop there. It increases stakeholder trust and loyalty, and it gives you a competitive edge because you are building those ties. You are building those emotional ties that gives you the benefit of the doubt when something goes wrong and you don't have, and the heat's on you in the moment to have a response in so many times, in so many cases. That benefit of the doubt gives you a competitive edge. You're following your stakeholders who believe in your organization. It gives you a competitive edge, and it builds true brand resilience. So the Crisis Ready Institute is brand new. It's the newest initiative. Who you are looking at right now on this panel during this discussion are the Institute's Global Advisory Council. I call it GAC, Erin calls it GAC. Always makes me laugh when you say that. And we have a mission. We have a very, very, values-driven mission to create resilient cultures by elevating readiness and fostering community to better protect people, brands, and the environment in times of crisis and beyond. And when when we're looking around and watching everything that's happening in the world this year, and one of the things that I've been seeing is, that we've all been seeing, is that people don't have the answers and they don't know where to turn. And I don't care where you are within an organization or what industry you're in, I really want you to have somewhere to turn to. And so the 6 of us are coming together, and we have created a crisis ready coaching program. And what this is that space for you to, if you enjoyed this conversation today, this is going to be a regular part of it. And not just with the 6 of us, but when we see it, you know, what do we do with employee, you know, the legalese and the, you know, different aspects of actually embedding this crisis ready culture and the different dynamics, cybersecurity. Ashley, today you posted something on LinkedIn that looked at InfoSec and, you know, the whole COVID's impact on InfoSec and information security. When you're looking at all of the multifaceted dynamics of your crisis readiness, looking at it from a cultural standpoint, right? It's cross-organizational. There's no place right now that exists that you can go to and you can say, you can have all of those answers, and you can be a part of a community that says, hey, we get it. We don't have all of the answers either, but here's the piece of the answer that we do have, and we'll give that to you. And what's the piece that you have? Because I know you have some, and share that with us, and let's support each other and create a space where people feel safe and can go to for the answers. And that doesn't exist right now. So that is what we are in the process of putting together. Today is the first time that we are announcing it. Really the goal here is to strengthen your skills, to strengthen everybody's skills in crisis readiness, because this is the new normal. This is, leaders are starting to look at, when they hire, you know, they want to see how resilient you are and how, you know, what experiences you have. And we all have experiences now dealing with COVID-19 and everything that's going on in the world. But what does that really mean? And how can you fine tune those to actually put those on your resume and bring that of value to you and to the organization for which you're a part of, and use that to your and the organization's benefit, to hone your culture of resilience. And that's everything that we're talking about here. It really is, for us, it's really about a crisis ready culture. And that's a commitment to mindset, that is a commitment to leadership, that is a commitment to what you do every single day, day in and day out, and how that reflects on your brand, and how you're then, you have that agility to respond effectively when you're faced with a challenging situation that you've never been faced with before. To gain from ongoing access to specialized experts. There's a wealth of knowledge in this panel right now, as well as in this entire webinar with all of the viewers that are here, and everything that's even being shared in the chat while we're having this discussion is evidence of that. So gain from ongoing access to specialized experts as you encounter problems, to be able to say, hey, this is what my organization is facing. Probably other organizations are facing the same thing. Can we bring such and such type of expert to do something like this? The Crisis Ready Institute has that access to go do that. And we want to create a space where that is now available to you, right, when you need it. And to leverage a community of support, because we keep saying it, we don't have all of the answers. Nobody has all of the answers, but we do need that. We do need that push. We do need to be held accountable. We do need a place where we can go and ask questions, and a safe space where we can say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't feel comfortable in this. What are you guys seeing? And have that community of support that's got your back through this, that helps you get the buy-in and support that you need from leadership and all of the challenges that you're facing internally. There is no space that exists for this right now. And that is something that everybody on this line believes shouldn't be the case. This space should exist, and now it does. So very quickly, what's included within this coaching program? Professional training. So the Crisis Ready model is the basis, for me, it's the basis of my work, and starting to now really be a collaborative effort. It's recognized as industry best practice and will continue to be so. It's taught in higher education curriculum around the world, and it is now going to be available to you moving forward weekly, just giving you the fundamental building blocks to really every single week, every single day, every single month, progressively strengthen your culture with true best practice, crisis readiness, brand resilience, to build your brand resilience. Expert coaching, something we've talked about, live sessions like this with the people on this call, with others, access to us. There's a group where you can go and have access to us on a daily, weekly basis. You can ask your questions. You don't have to wait for live events. Those questions will trigger more live events because it's a community thing, it's a group thing, so that we can all go through this together and strengthen each of our skills and each of our cultures together. Master classes goes to those really niche specific expert sessions that are going to be very concentrated on a very specific topic that is of interest of the moment, that people need, that organizations need information or access to information to. Like I said, the Crisis Ready Institute has a very, very global network of incredible professionals and experts around the world, and we have access to bring that to you. So that's going to be a dedicated focus. Resources dedicated to helping you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are resources available to you that will be made available to you continuously and that continue to evolve as times continue to change. So you have access to that. So you have flowcharts and checklists and just anything that you would need to help make your life easier through these very challenging times. And of course, that community aspect. So it's a network. We have the Crisis Ready community that is a growing community already that's a part of this as well. And just getting access to so many different experts so that when you talk about diversity, when you have a challenge, when you have a question, you want to go outside of your knowledge, outside of your experience, outside of your mindset, and go to different cultures, different industries, different levels of experience, different people who have walked in different paths, and say, you know, what's your take on this, or how do you view this, and what would my community or my stakeholders view this as? And just having access to that community to support you is a big part of this. So giving you that competitive advantage, this is our focus. The experts on this call are, you know, here, we are dedicated to the mission of creating a very, you know, helping every organization become crisis ready and create a crisis resilient world together, and everything that means. And I'm really, really proud, and I'm really honored to have every single one of these names as part of this group for you, this coaching program for you. Who this is for. So if you're responsible for any aspect of your crisis readiness, of this back to normal, this figuring out what's next for your organization, this is for you. If you want to hone your own crisis team and your own crisis management skills, and just to use that, to leverage that to strengthen your own value that you bring to your organization and to your community, this is for you. If you want to make sure that your crisis readiness meets industry best practice, because there's a lot out there, and there's a lot out there that is not best practice, then this is for you. If you want to benefit from access to industry leading experts, this is absolutely for you. And if you would benefit from like-minded peer group that will help you, to hold you accountable, that will give you that strategic support, that insight along the way, then this is absolutely for you. And if you're committed to building your crisis resilience for your organization, and if you're committed to taking that even further and being a leader for your community and being a leader, you know, within your organization and for your stakeholders outside of your organization, then this is what we're all about. Then this, you know, this is exactly what we're all about. And when we started this, we looked at it and we said, okay, right now, budgets are restricted, and this community doesn't exist. This type of program doesn't exist, and we want it accessible to the most amount of people who will benefit from it, who are made for it, who it's made for as possible. So we have put a lot of attention into the investment in this program. And normally, you know, in the past for my coaching programs like this, you're looking at upwards of $25,000 for a 6-month program. This is an ongoing month-to-month program at $449. So if it's a corporate budget, I'm pretty sure that it'll fit that. And if hopefully if it's a personal budget, for whatever reason, because you see the value here and you want to use this to strengthen your skills and the value that you bring to the workplace, then we're hoping that it meets that as well. And so with all of that said, guys, do you have anything that you want to add that would help people understand what we're doing, get excited about it?
Well, thank you, Melissa, and thank you to everyone who has joined us today, and of course to my colleagues here. I would simply say that the world has taught us all the importance of being crisis ready, but also of being crisis prepared and crisis resilient. And the Institute brings all of that knowledge and experience and the tools that we need today to help us prepare and position ourselves for what's next, whatever that may be. And I encourage and I hope that those listening will join us in this journey and in this community to help make sure that we are crisis ready, not only now, but for any future crisis that we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Lacey.
And I'll just add, I think that was beautifully said, Lacey. You know, join us in this journey because we're stronger together. And I've never met a more passionate group of individuals such as yourself that is ready to take this challenge on and, you know, make it a safe space for everybody and involve as many people as want to be involved. And that's just what I love about it is, you know, I find that in our crisis world, we are all by ourselves, sitting in front of our computer, you know, doing what we do day in and day out. And the thing that I lean on the most is this community of support I can go to and know that other people are in it with me, that I can bounce ideas off of them. So truly, truly in this journey together. So thank you.
And that is really, really well said, both of you. It's really what this is all about. We know that right now people don't have all the answers. We know that they're looking for the answers. There's no one really leading that path. Those answers aren't consolidated in one area or in one accessible space. With that community of support on the back end as well, that really holds you up and is there for you in whatever capacity you need them, you know, whatever that means to you. Yeah, and just when we started talking, it just doesn't make sense to me that this doesn't exist somewhere. And I'm honored that we get to be, you know, we get to kind of launch this idea and put it out there and then hopefully just watch it grow and continuously. And it's not just COVID-19. It's not just, you know, the current epidemic of inequality and injustice and the way that the world needs to and is going to change. It's about being a part of that change. It's about that severe weather you know, season that is upon us. It's about the next thing, whether that's for your organization or for the world, which right now we're kind of seeing that pattern of it's for the world, it seems. But knowing that to have a safe space that will continue to help you strengthen those skills and empower yourself, your culture, and then that translates into leadership and everything that brings to your community and your stakeholders and your business. I know that Eric had to drop off quickly, and Chris is, as everybody can imagine, on some very interesting times and has a lot on his plate. I'm so grateful for you all for having joined in, you know, giving this time to everybody to share your knowledge and to do so in such a way that people can use, right? It's not just talk, it's really what does this mean and how can you put this forward and how can you move forward with it? So thank you so much for your time and for being willing to do that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, Melissa, for putting it together. I mean, it's truly your leadership too. Don't, you know, I'm not good at talking myself up, but I'm happy to say Melissa is a very passionate person when it comes to creating crisis-ready culture. And I obviously, the framework that she's put in place has been proven by, you know, being used at many universities and major organizations across the country and around the world. So I couldn't be happier with a true leader in the space to guide us, right, in this crazy, unprecedented time that we're in.
Oops, I was muted. Thanks, Ashley. Everybody had to jump because I know that we are past the time. We are 9 minutes, I believe, past our 90-minute session. But there was just so much value that This is going to be recorded. So for those of you who are still on the line, I'll stick around. Ashley, I don't know if you can stick around. If you have more questions, we're here to answer them. Otherwise, offline, if you go to Crisis Ready Coaching Program, you can learn more about this program and what it's designed to do for you and for all of us and for the world. And that's really what it's all about. And we will be sending you that list of takeaways that were so just passionately and benevolently shared here. And anything else that you guys need, you can just reach out at the Crisis Ready Institute's website. You'll find all of our bios and all of our LinkedIn profiles and all of our emails. So thank you to everybody who sat on this call, who contributed to the chat. Let's keep the conversation going in the Crisis Ready community throughout the program, online and offline. And thank you, everybody.